interesting experience.
And a hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 195 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday early evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. So today is the 35th anniversary of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade opening in theaters. That would be the second sequel to the phenomenally successful Raiders of the Lost Ark, a film franchise which has 5 films in all. Here's the Cliff Notes version. First 3, incredible. 4th one, shit. 5th one, pretty good. Thanks, I'll be here all week. But this is one of those kind of things, because the first 3 films are so beloved, and deservedly so, in my opinion, where we could talk about something being a fan favorite sequel, but both Temple of Doom and Last Crusade are fan favorite sequels, depending on who you ask. Quentin Tarantino famously does not like Last Crusade, loves Spielberg, loves Sean Connery, loves Harrison, but he feels that the film misses the mark for reasons that only he could explain. He didn't really explain it. He doesn't find the character of Henry Jones Sr. to be interesting at all. He thinks he's dull. Okay. I mean, that's what makes a horse race, right? I think that Last Crusade is a better movie than Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom has a slightly greater rewatchability factor because it's so many incredible set pieces, one piled on top of another on top of another. The first and last movies. So Raiders of the Lost Ark is the best film of the entire, all 5. I think most fans of the series would agree with that. Most. I find the third one easier to just get into. And from the Harrison Ford, Han Solo, or Indiana Jones, not so much comparing the characters or saying which character means more to you, but in this instance, I can always watch one of the original trilogy of Indiana Jones films. Sometimes I'm just not in the mood to put a Star Wars movie, fire it up. I guess that as much as I love Star Wars episodes 4, 5, and 6, more so than the other 6 films in the official canon film series, I'm more of an Indiana Jones fan. It's not something that I really spent that much time thinking about, but everything is a list and a poll, and what are your thoughts here, and give me this percentage and that. Yeah, I'm a bigger fan of the Indiana Jones franchise than the Star Wars franchise. Too bad, so sad. And I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek too. OG Star Trek, phenomenal. Especially Star Trek The Wrath of Khan. Gone! Gone, you bloodsucker! Who could outdo William Shatner, right? 93, still going strong. But I did not see, this is unbelievable. Now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't see any, and I've not ever seen an Indiana Jones film in theaters. That is disgraceful. But in my defense, only the first 3 are really important to see in theaters. And Raiders of the Lost Ark is rated R because there are a lot of adult themes and things that happen in that film that 7-year-old kid, which is how old I was when Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, not really appropriate. My parents didn't make a mistake there. They had an opportunity to see the movie with family friends. They were going to go to a late night screening, and I think they ended up going, it wasn't really that late. When you're a kid, everything after 7 o'clock is late. But I had a babysitter back then, and I think they saw it. But they weren't gonna let me see a rated R movie. They had enough trouble keeping me away from rated R movies because HBO, this is a little bit old fashioned, but HBO did not ever show R-rated movies before 8 p.m. I think the way they worked it was from 8 p.m. to like 3 or 4 a.m., they could start a movie that was R-rated, But all other times during the day, they just didn't do it. They just didn't do it. There were some high-level negotiations between my parents when Raiders of the Lost Ark was getting ready to premiere on HBO. My mom did not want me to see it. My dad thought about it, and I'd been talking about this movie for a year. I was really disappointed that I didn't get to see it in theaters. So the intent was there. The flesh was willing, but the 7-year-old, well, the spirit wasn't weak. I just didn't have, you don't have an opportunity to do much of anything without your parents say so, right? I mean, they dragged me to Chariots of Fire not long after Raiders of the Lost Ark was in theaters. I didn't have any choice there, luckily. But I didn't see Raiders until HBO, and on a normal, nice, for the day, 19-inch TV sometime in summer or fall of 1982, I watched it with my dad, and I loved it. Fantastic. Everything that I had hoped for. Same reaction that I had when Star Wars Episode 4 premiered on HBO on a Saturday night in June of 1983, I believe it was, and I watched it on that same 19-inch, very heavy, in the old days they weren't, it's about 20 pounds. You could, no, this was take what my dad used to say, you gotta be Man Mountain Dean to move this thing. Whoever Man Mountain Dean is, I don't even know who that is. But Dad used to talk about this mythical Man Mountain Dean. On that TV, normal sound, those two films created by George Lucas, they still played. They still played like gangbusters. Blown away by both of them. Holy shit. Amazing. And right around the time that Raiders of the Lost Ark premiered, so did Chariots of Fire, which I hadn't seen since we saw it in the movies, September 1981. And HBO was able to run that movie repeatedly because it was PG. That was to the advantage of younger people like myself who happen to be fans of that film. They could have twice as many showings. Chariots of Fire could be on at 6 in the morning, or it could be on at 8 or 10 or midnight. By the time Temple of Doom landed in the summer of 1984, I had a little bit more leeway what I could do. And that was the first year of the so-called PG-13. And by the time you got to where I was 10 going on 11, my parents really weren't, and they weren't Martinists. These were not strict people, but there were certain things that Mom and Dad, they tried to keep me away from. And it never was out of malice. They really thought that you probably shouldn't see nudity. He certainly shouldn't see sexual relations in a movie. But by the time Temple of Doom was coming out, and I had seen Raiders, the movie is so great that I watched it every time it was on. They didn't say that I couldn't see Temple of Doom because it wasn't rated R. And there was a controversy with that movie and Joe Dante's Gremlins, and there were other films that it ended in the creation of the PG-13 rating, which seems absurd, but it was better than just going from GPGRX. They needed something in the middle. Spielberg famously said, I don't try to make R-rated movies. I don't want to make R-rated movies. He didn't think the Temple of Doom should have gotten an R rating, and the PG-13 rating was created, so there was no reason for Steven Spielberg to get into a fight with the MPAA. So it's good that was sidestepped, but he was frustrated because he knew there was a chance it was going to get an R rating. But, that movie is not for kids. The Temple of Doom, not for kids. But I had a chance to see it in theaters, and I fucked up. I was in Florida visiting my dad's parents, Grandpa Nat, Grandma Irene. Grandpa Nat, like his son, my dad, was a big movie fan. Big movie fan. Didn't go to the movies very often, but he was a big movie fan. Used to watch on TV, and he had loved Raiders of the Lost Ark. He watched it whenever it was on. Used to look for it in the TV listings. Huge fan of it. But he also liked Star Trek. He liked the intellectual, capabilities of Mr. Spock and the logic and the reason. So as luck would have it, both Star Trek: The Search for Spock and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, they were both playing at the local theater I want to say it was in Lauderhill. I'm not 100% on that. Grandparents lived in Lauderdale Lakes. I'm ashamed to say that I chose Star Trek: The Search for Spock. Now that movie is okay. Christopher Lloyd is, good as the villain. But come on, I had a chance to see Temple of Doom on the big screen and I blew it. Ugh. So, too bad, so sad. Didn't see Temple of Doom till it premiered on HBO, and on that same television, that 19-inch big TV that only Man Mountain Dean could take around and move around by himself, watched it the Saturday night that it premiered on HBO. I think it was actually a couple of years. I don't think that it premiered as fast as Raiders of the Lost Ark had, but I could be wrong about that. But I watched it and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was even more entertaining than the first one. So there's certain things where I agree with Tarantino when he says that Temple of Doom is his favorite. It has the most great individual sequences, and to me it is the most rewatchable of all of those films. But I don't think it's better than either the first or third. But neither here nor there. When Last Crusade hit in, May 24th, 1989, I had an opportunity to see it with my next door neighbor. Didn't take that opportunity. Then he went again. I had another opportunity. Didn't take it again. And I don't know why I didn't see it. I don't know why I suddenly, well, I do know. I was just a really irritable, agitated, angry kid. I went to the movies a number of times that summer. I just didn't see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, despite the fact the local papers were over the moon with praise. Everyone was talking about Connery and how incredible he was as Henry Jones Sr. And then Harrison Ford was matching his energy. And that the villains, it was interesting what they did there. You got some Nazis in there and let's fuck those assholes up or whatever. But I didn't see it. I had an opportunity. I wanted to see Star Trek V, which turned out to be not very good. I love Shatner, but it's just not good. There was so much potential for a better movie to be made from that material. Lawrence Lukenbill, terrific. I just don't think that movie is good. But I saw Lethal Weapon 2 twice. I saw License to Kill, the James Bond film with Timothy Dalton. I saw Batman. I mean, that was an incredible summer for movies. I think I saw Batman twice. So I don't really have an excuse. When my next door neighbor went, I should have jumped on board because, like a whole Friends thing. Should have done it, didn't do it. So did not see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade until it premiered on VHS. Not that long after it was released. They didn't do that thing, which never made any sense to me. Star Wars Episode 4, 1977 in theaters, didn't land on HBO for 6 years. Empire Strikes Back, 1980, Star Wars Episode 5, it didn't hit HBO until like a week before I was bar mitzvahed. That would be December 13, 1986. It premiered literally earlier in December or November. It was something in that time frame. I don't know what the fuck that was, but it happened. You had to wait forever. You youngins have got it so good. You can watch any movie you want right now. You might have to pay a couple of bucks. But Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I rented from good old South Shore Video, just up the block from where I grew up in Massapequa. And not surprisingly, on the same TV, I loved it. Unabashedly, unreservedly adored that movie. And I still adore that movie. I think that the kind of strange plot twists with the Elsa, Dr. Schneider, that's a little weird. And Donovan and some of the stuff maybe doesn't play quite as well today as it did back then. But the action sequences are very well done and certainly more grounded than what we saw, well, really in the second film. And of course he chose poorly. So me saying the action scenes are grounded, that's a pretty significant special effects shot on par with the first movie where you look at the Ark as it's being opened and you are going to turn into claymation, basically. If you don't know what claymation is, Google it. But you're going to turn into soup. Soup, you know what that is. Let's just say we're turning into soup. If you got glasses, it'll be soup with your glasses. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade made $475 million at the box office. The original Batman, Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton, directed by Tim Burton. I don't know the numbers. That was also a monster hit. That was the summer of a series of incredibly huge hits. Lethal Weapon 2, a way bigger hit than the first one. It's an easier movie to watch. Even though there's some brutality, Lethal Weapon 2 is somehow more fan-friendly than the first one. They softened the character of Martin Riggs just enough. They made him more likable and easier to root for. Patsy Kensit in that movie humanizes him. Man, she probably should have had a bigger career. She's fantastic in that film. She and Mel had good chemistry. They're, not surprisingly, two attractive people. They look good together on screen. And Joe Pesci was just an absolute home run. Getting him as whatever you want, Leo gets. They fuck you at the drive-thru. They fuck you at the drive-thru. Dad and I were cracking up during both times we saw the movie. One time I saw it with him, the other time I saw it on my own. And then there was another, I was trying to see a different film. It may have been Karate Kid 3. And I screwed up and I ended up seeing License to Kill again. What are you going to do? You know, you're a kid, it's just, you fuck up. You spend too much time in the arcade playing video games, and then the next thing you know, you miss the start of the screenings. Fuck it, I'll go see this movie again. I liked it a lot. No problem. But for those who don't know what Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is about, and I assume if you're watching this kind of a podcast, you are a movie fan, and you've probably seen all of the Indiana Jones films, with the possible exception of Dial of Destiny. Maybe you haven't seen that. But Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is set at a point in time when World War II is still ongoing. The first movie before the war, and then the second movie is actually a prequel, so the character of Indiana Jones is supposed to be younger in Temple of Doom than he is in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Last Crusade, we see the origins of how Indiana Jones got his start, not just as a brilliant archaeologist, a respected college professor, and a good teacher when he is actually in class, but we see the start, his first adventure, where he finds the Cross of Coronado. And young Indy was played in the movie by the unfortunate River Phoenix, who is an enormous talent, and his brother Joaquin, Oscar winner, also an enormous talent. River was different, though. River Phoenix had the range of the great actors. He had the looks. He had the matinee idol looks. It's kind of the difference between comparing, I always talk about these guys, Dustin Hoffman, Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, Robert Redford. They're all enormously talented in one way or another, some of them in all ways. But Dustin Hoffman was a leading man. He doesn't look like Warren Beatty or Robert Redford. Joaquin Phoenix has headline films. He is an attractive man. River Phoenix looked like an Abercrombie and Fitch model. When he made the movie the year before, Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon, not good. But every poster in that film emphasizes, look at how good looking this guy is. Sometimes all you have to do is rely on the smile and the charm of your star, your leading man. River Phoenix looks nothing like Harrison Ford. I mean, obviously, looks nothing like Harrison Ford. But he gets the spirit and the passion of Indiana Jones. It feels right. It doesn't feel like out of place, as if this belongs in a different movie. As he would say, it belongs in a museum. I love River Phoenix's performance in that. He actually was nominated for an Oscar for a movie that had, I think it was the previous year, called Running on Empty. So Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon, not good. But Running on Empty is about a kid whose parents are Russian spies. And, no, I'm sorry, that was Little Nikita. That was a film he made with the first film he made with Sidney Poitier. Running on Empty, though, with Judd Hirsch, years before You Punch the President, played Julius Levinson in Independence Day. But his parents are on the run. They were radicals, they committed crimes, and they're on the run. And River, in a supporting role, really makes you feel his character's dilemma and all of that. He was just a great actor. And his last big role in Sneakers with Robert Redford and Sidney Poitier, Dan Aykroyd, David Strathairn, Sir Ben Kingsley, Mary McDonnell. He's so good in that film. Even though he was presumably having a lot of difficulties getting to work on time and hitting his marks, you wouldn't know it. He was just gold out there. He was so good, making you believe. Like his character, it was one of those performances where the character is presented as brilliant but also awkward, and like half the time you wonder how this guy can even tie his shoes. A little bit like me. This guy's really smart. No, he's not. He's a fucking idiot. What are you kidding? That's the character, the kind of character that River Phoenix plays in the movie Sneakers. But right off the bat, by showing us that, because you could make Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and not show anything of what I just said. You don't need to see his first adventure. But they took a chance, and Spielberg went for it, and he cast the right guy. And I think that is a fantastic sequence. In a similar vein, I really enjoy the opening sequence of Dial of Destiny, where Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, is de-aged to around the time frame of when Last Crusade would have taken place. That's how they get the Mads Mikkelsen character in there from Dial of Destiny. So Last Crusade, at its heart, is a story about a father and son who are so much alike and have so many similar interests. Well, of course they don't get along and haven't gotten along, despite having great meaning in each other's lives and having spent an enormous amount of time together. Henry Jones Sr. is not an absentee father. He just was difficult. As Harrison's Indiana Jones explains, or Henry Jones Jr., oh, your dad was a professor? Yeah, he's the professor that none of the kids wanted to have. He's demanding, exacting, sense of humor, very clever, but the sort of personality who, if he latches onto something, he will not let go. And that is a huge part of the story and what drives his character and what has gotten his character, mild spoilers, into trouble as the movie opens. So we don't know him. If you don't know anything about the Indiana Jones series, somehow you've become you're an Indiana Jones virgin and you don't read anything about it. You just dive in and you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark and you watch Temple of Doom. There's no mention of Henry Jones Sr. We know that Indiana Jones has a dad, but he's not referenced. There's no mention of him. So when they start talking in Indy 3, Last Crusade, that your father's gone missing, oh, okay. And it turns out it's played by Sean Connery. And there was a little bit of chatter about the fact, and this is kind of a Cary Grant thing, where Cary Grant in North by Northwest, his mother is played by the actress, she's great, Jessie Royce Landis. She was almost a love interest for his character 4 years earlier in To Catch a Thief. He went for the daughter, aka Grace Kelly. But she's not that much older than him. I think she was 4 years older than Cary Grant. And she's playing his mom in North by Northwest after almost playing a love interest in To Catch a Thief 4 years earlier. Hollywood for you. But Sean Connery is only a dozen years older than Harrison Ford. So they didn't use age makeup on Connery for Last Crusade. But he was still in his 50s. I believe that Henry Jones Sr. is supposed to be closer to 70. It's not really specified. And Harrison Ford was 46 going on 47 when that film was shot. I think he's supposed to be more like 40. So if you look at it that way, it works. I don't care what anybody says. In the world of the film, it absolutely works. There's nothing like, well, he doesn't look old enough to be his dad. Yeah, he had kids when he was 15 or 16. He was a real player. I don't know. But if I didn't know the ages, it wouldn't bother me. I wouldn't say, well, he doesn't look old enough to be his dad. Yeah, he does. Absolutely. In my opinion, if I didn't know, it works. Whereas North by Northwest, Jessie Royce Landis looks like she's Cary Grant's age, and she more or less was. The character of Henry Jones Sr., to me and for me, is an almost perfect character. And I don't disagree with Quentin Tarantino on that many things. Some of his, he has these spontaneous eruptions where he'll just talk a million miles a minute, and he'll say a lot of stuff that I'm like, okay, well, maybe we know he knows what he's talking about. But some of the things he said about Kubrick and about Hitchcock, but I completely disagree with the idea that the character of Henry Jones Sr. is dull or boring or not it. I think the character is fascinating. And Sean Connery was coming off, he had just won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in The Untouchables. And that felt like a bit of a career topper for him, in a similar way that when Paul Newman finally won a Best Actor Oscar for The Color of Money, it was actually the year before The Untouchables that he won Best Actor, not Supporting, as Sir Sean won Best Supporting for The Untouchables. There was a sense that this was a career capper. It was a career capper for Newman. He made a number of really good movies after The Color of Money, and he was in Fat Man and Little Boy. That's kind of like the Oppenheimer of its day. Very good movie, but not nearly as good as Oppenheimer. And in Mr. and Mrs. Bridge and Blaze, Newman worked steadily, really until the late 1990s. But in the case of Connery, he turned around from winning Best Supporting Actor when he would have been like 57 going on 58, and he turned right into Last Crusade. And I don't know how they got him. Maybe he was just a Spielberg fan and always wanted to work with him, or he loved Harrison. I don't know. But getting him was just perfect casting. And there are these times in Hollywood where it feels as if a production is blessed. That even if the studio keeps fucking up or somebody makes a mistake, it all works out. And it's hard to imagine. Paul Newman is another actor who could have played that part. The Newman of that era could have played Henry Jones Sr. And it would have been a totally different kind of movie and a different performance, but Newman absolutely, and he also would have looked more age appropriate. Newman's maybe the only other actor I can think of that could have done it. Clint, no, wouldn't work. And Spielberg and Clint, they had some co-production, they worked together. No, thank you. I'm grateful that the stars aligned for Connery to get to do that. Because the character, he's so quirky. Henry Jones Sr. is so quirky. Yes, he's a bookworm. He's a workaholic. He's a obsession to the point of madness. But he never does exactly what you expect him to do. There are moments where it seems like he's out to lunch, but he isn't. And I remember the first time I saw the movie, I thought the character was just like head in the clouds and that he was like almost a space cadet. But then there is that scene where it looks like our intrepid heroes are screwed. And he pulls out his umbrella and he starts fucking around with the umbrella and making all kinds of bird noises at the gulls that are on the beach. And the gulls suddenly take flight and they take down the plane that is about to kill them. The look on Harrison Ford's face is the look that not only I had, but countless people who are having the same thoughts about this character seems like he's got 180 IQ, but he doesn't know which end is up. No, that's not true. It's just his way. He's very old-fashioned, and there are certain things that he's not going to say out loud. He's not going to tell his son he loves him, for one thing. But that scene is so critical because it shows this may be a man of thought. But how many people would have known to do that? How many people would know that if you start fucking around with your umbrella in 1942, you're about to be attacked by gunners from the air, and these birds are they're gonna knock the plane out of the sky, and you're gonna be saved. That one moment, to me, adds so much to that character. And Indiana Jones' appreciation, because he thinks he's just a bookworm. He's an academic. He's not a man of action. He's a man of thought. Well, he may not be a man of action in part because he is supposed to be older. He saved your bacon, kid, Junior. Somewhere along the line he learned that. You didn't. You sure as fuck didn't say, Dad, start flapping your umbrella around and it'll knock the plane down because the birds are going to attack it. You're going to be bird strikes. The plot involves a search for the Holy Grail, hence The Last Crusade. And the mechanics of plot aren't really that important. We can surmise who's going to live and who's going to die and all of that sort of stuff. The relationship between Indy and Henry is what sells it. And the way that this kind of glacier between them, that each guy has things they want to say to the other, and hopefully they don't wait too long. And that's something that went over my head as a kid watching the movie and just loving it. Because I wasn't thinking in terms of mortality. I wasn't thinking about my parents passing or even my grandparents. And this movie, there is a moment where Henry, this isn't really much of a spoiler. How many times has Indiana Jones cheated death? But there is a moment where Henry thinks that Indy is gone. And it is some of Connery's finest work anywhere, where he realizes, I didn't have a chance to tell him. There was so much that I wanted to tell my son that I didn't tell, and now what? And when it turns out that Indy is not gone, the emotion, the way that the tears almost seem to jump from Connery, he's so happy that his boy is not gone. Well, Indy's just exhausted because he should have been killed. But it's a moment of such power and beauty, and another reason, as if you need more, why Connery was so perfect in this role. This isn't James Bond. James Bond has moments of anger and moments of emotion, but nothing like that. And he certainly, Connery didn't get to do that as Malone in The Untouchables. Totally different kind of character. We were led to believe in Last Crusade that Senior is a stiff academic. Well, maybe he is most of the time, but he could be as emotional, or as he says, I'm as human as the next man. I was the next man. But I don't want to go into too much plot detail, because for those who've seen it, they already know what this movie entails. It is a great film, whether seen on the big screen, whether seen at home, doesn't matter. There are moments, a lot of moments of humor, and there's even humor within action scenes and moments where the characters are in peril. The chemistry between Sir Sean and Harrison is off the charts. It's really amazing that these two guys who hadn't worked together, I don't know how well they knew one another. You know, sometimes there are people who work together for the first time and it turns out they have decades of history that they've been friends, and I have no idea. But you would have thought that, well, the old man was probably in the previous movie. There is such an ease to the rapport and comfort, even in the constant bickering. And Harrison is the kind of actor who has never had a problem with ceding the spotlight to his co-star. And he gives Sean so many chances to just knock it out of the park. And he does. Now, I'm not going to say that I wish the series had ended after 3. I just wish they had chosen a better script for Crystal Skull, because Dial of Destiny, to me, it's a 3.5 star out of 4 movie for me. Well worth it. But there were so many different potential Indy 4 projects, and I just think that Crystal Skull was a mistake. It's a 2.5, almost 3-star movie. Can't be catastrophically bad. It's Spielberg. Spielberg, prime, peak Spielberg. There's nothing wrong with his direction. Story just isn't as good as the others. It's just my opinion. This is all just my opinion. But you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores of the various films, they're all certified fresh. I don't know how Crystal Skull is in the 70s, but it is. At least it was the last time I checked. And Dial of Destiny is, I believe, at 70. It was in the 50s, and then as time went on, more and more favorable reviews came in from critics. But That's neither here nor there. Nobody really cares about reviews. It's how did the movie make you feel, and how did this franchise, how does it play for you? And for me, Spielberg's Holy Trilogy, all three, are three of my favorite films. If I were listing a top 20, all three would be in my top 20. No question about it. Top 10, that's a little trickier. But top 20, for sure. All three are in there. They'd have to be. The number of times I've rewatched, and I can always fire one of them up. But Last Crusade has a special place in my heart, thanks to the work and the masterstroke of casting. Sir Sean Connery, the late great, as Dr. Henry Jones, Sr. This has been episode 195 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 196 real soon. Till then, peace.